Well, hello everyone. My name is Darrell Stephens, also known as Laser Dave, and we have an exciting application Third Thursday training seminar for you today. The title today is Trotec Laser Training on CorelDRAW 2020. This has been a long time coming. I've spent a lot of time working on different tips and tricks and techniques that are specific for you as laser operators and owners to operate your laser system running CorelDRAW. CorelDRAW has kind of become the standard software for most laser operators and owners when operating your laser system. So today I'm going to go through several different capabilities on basic setups, all the way through tools and tricks and techniques specifically for improving your process while running CorelDRAW. If you have any questions whatsoever when it comes to these type of Corel questions and stuff like that, I also have Darrell Stephens and Roger Wambolt, which is our Senior Product Trainer from CorelDRAW, which will help answer questions at the end of the course. If the question arises during the actual training seminar, please post it right then and there, and then we'll answer those questions as they come in order as the questions received. There is a lot of people watching this one, so as soon as you can post that question, of course, you'll get your question answered at the end of the course. So let's go ahead and switch to my screen here, and we will get going on this course. So this course itself is Trotec Third Thursday Laser Training on CorelDRAW 2020. We're not going to get into a lot of the fills and details specifically for CorelDRAW. This is going to be specific just for the laser itself. There are a lot of QR codes within this seminar. And if you're not familiar with a QR code, it's very simple to use. Just turn on your camera app, point the camera at the QR code, but don't take a photo, and a link will show on your screen of your mobile device. Select that link to get quick and easy access to web links, files, and videos. Trotec is also a very social company. If you want to keep up with current events, trainings, products, applications, and laser materials, please scan the QR code and subscribe to your favorite social media platform. We are on YouTube, Facebook, Instagram, LinkedIn, Pinterest, and Twitter. Little about my background. I've been using CorelDRAW for over 20 years, and I've mastered the last 16 versions of the software in relation to laser material processing. So I've worked in applications labs and test labs, doing training as well as working with lasers in CorelDRAW since version 7. So I have a lot of skills when it comes to understanding how to convert certain files to make them laser friendly, to make them laser compatible. And so that's what we're going to do today, is we're going to cover a little bit on how to set your CorelDRAW up for your laser system. I'm going to go through the operational basics for those of you that are just starting with laser systems, and just give you the overall setup, as well as some different capabilities that you can set your CorelDRAW up to maybe make it a little more user-friendly or aesthetically pleasing. Then we're going to go into some operational basics of the laser system, or of CorelDRAW, just to give those of you that maybe need a refresher course on some of the basics of how it works, or the novice out there, because we've got a huge plethora of skill set out there. Some people are just starting, others may be an advanced user like myself. We have something for everyone. And so the operational basics are going to be quick, and we're going to go through kind of, basically how to set it up, how to draw some single outlines, and just kind of go through the basic tools so that we have a baseline. Then I'm going to go through my favorite section here, which is the recommended laser file creation tools. These are tools that I myself have found to be the most advantageous within CorelDRAW for processing with your laser system. These are tools that will help make your process of designing or bringing other people's files in and editing, modifying, or adjusting them more efficient, and make that transition process of making it from a file on your screen to a laser-ready file. And then at the very end, I will go through some other training resources that we have deferred people off to in the past if you really want to immerse yourself into some more future training abilities. I do want to please kind of note everyone, using CorelDRAW, there are typically several different ways to do just about everything. This training is going to show a process of an advanced advanced laser operator that has been found to be very efficient working with laser technology. However, if there is a method or process that I show that you do differently, there is no wrong way to do it. So, I mean, there are 5 or 6 different ways to do just about everything in CorelDRAW. So my method may be my method, but please understand, if you have a method or a different way of getting to some technique or process, don't worry that the method that I show you may be different. If your method works for you, go ahead and continue to use that method. The next one is kind of understanding here CorelDRAW versions. There are a lot of different versions out there. Actually, there's 22 different versions of CorelDRAW. And this training version will be on the latest version, of course, because it is the latest and greatest, and it's going to have the most current and up-to-date tools. But most of the tools that will be covered will be available on versions of CorelDRAW going back 10 years or more, some quite a bit more, depending on the tool itself. However, please note, some of the tool locations may have moved from older versions. And so if you are running an earlier version of CorelDRAW and I showcase a tool or a process or a technique within CorelDRAW, understand that it may or may not still be there based on the version that you're currently running, or it may be in a different location. So you can let us know. We can definitely help you out with that, or you can do a quick search to see if that tool even exists or is available on the version that you may be running. Okay, let's go ahead and get going here on setting up CorelDRAW for your laser system. This is very important because if you don't set your laser system up properly, the laser is not going to identify certain attributes of the design software so that it can cut properly, to engrave properly. So for example, color palettes need to be set up properly to match your laser system. If it doesn't use the right color, the laser system will either ignore it or nothing will happen. Most laser systems, including Trotec, use very specific colors, very specific page size that matches your laser system. And there are certain things that have to be set up properly in order to run correctly. And this holds true for any graphic software, but today we're going to cover, of course, setting it up with the CorelDRAW. If you are using a version of CorelDRAW that is just set up for graphics and you have it kind of set up already and you want to start over, here's one of my first tips. If you want to reset it back to default, so as though you just uninstalled the program and reinstalled it, or if you've had issues or you're not sure what's going on in the background of the program and you want to just kind of start fresh, here's a quick key that you can use when starting up CorelDRAW and wanting to basically start over as though you just reinstalled it. If you click and hold the F8 key, the function 8 key, and while holding that F8 key, go ahead and use your mouse to open up the program just by double clicking it or opening it from your start menu on your computer system. And then what's going to happen if you hold that F8 key during that time, it's going to say, it's going to pop up a warning that says, are you sure you want to overwrite the current workspace to factory default? If you hit select, or if you select yes, then what's going to happen is your CorelDRAW will be reset as though you just reinstalled it. This can actually solve a lot of issues in some cases if you're not sure what's going on or what was turned on, or if you've had other operators that used a computer and maybe have a feature or a mode or something turned on that you may not like or be familiar with. Sometimes it's easier to just reset it and make it back to set it back to defaults. And then we can go through the next slide that I have here, which is going to be setting it up. So this is basically setting it up. So the first time you open CorelDRAW, when you open it onto the screen, this is basically as though it's been just reinstalled. When you reinstall CorelDRAW, this is the main screen that you're going to get. So to set it up for the laser system, the first thing we're going to want to do is we're going to want to go to a new file. So we're going to go to a new file. We're going to hit File, New. There's, again, several different ways to do this. And then we're going to go ahead and set up our initial page size. You can adjust the name if you like. This name is basically just for this file, so this is not entirely necessary, but a lot of people like to put a name or even save it as a template. We also need to be in an RGB field. It should default to that, but if it's not, make sure that it's set for RGB. The next is we want to set up our page size to the laser table. Your laser table is your dimensions or the largest area that your laser can do. And I like to say, do not show this dialog again because this is a one-time thing, and then go ahead and hit OK. So what this has done is it's going to go ahead and set up my first page to match that of my 24. And I've got it set up. So now, next we need to set up our color palettes. Color palettes are, again, very important because this is cutting, marking, engraving. So to do custom palettes, window palettes, and then click on color palette. You have your driver job control disk. You can and we have a Corel folder in that disk, CorelDRAW. And we have one for color. And when you do that, so the color palettes that are on that disk currently are an older version, so nothing will show up. You have to go to the bottom of the screen and click on Legacy Custom Palette. When you do that, you see all the different palettes. And the reason that is so that it works with all the older versions as well. Go and then select the Trotec color palette. And then once we select Trotec color palette, it's going to give you that ability and then open on the right side of your screen. These are the different color palettes. You can leave the existing one if you're doing a lot of graphic design, and you could put several different color palettes here as needed. So you can have your laser palettes if you've got different design softwares, or if you're doing anything else, go ahead and leave it, or you can adjust it. You can also right-click on color palettes and remove them. The next aspect of the laser system is we need to set it up specifically for cutting. So select a drawing or design element, but don't actually drawing anything. So a circle or square or a line. And then what we're going to do is we're going to change the line thickness of that design element. And you only need to do one of them, so a square or a circle, whatever, and then change the line thickness to hairline. Hairline is seen by the laser system as a cut path. And so in order for the laser to cut, it's got to be the right color from the color palette, and it has to be hairline. So we now have that set up. I want to set up my field to kind of match the laser. I'm going to double click on the rulers. One of the rulers will open up the dialog option box for your ruler section. And I'm going to change the vertical to match the y-axis or the depth of your laser system. So if you've got a 12-inch deep laser, put a 12-inch there. If you've got a 20 or 24, what that's going to do is going to set your rulers up so they match your laser system. Your upper left-hand corner will now be 0, 0. And that is ultimately all we need to do. At this point, we'll hit Tools, Save Settings as default. And whenever we save settings as default, this is going to save all those attributes that we just did as a your attributes as a default, so that next time you open up and run the laser system, or you run the file and set for your laser system, it is now going to be ready to go specifically for your laser. You don't have to do that again. Anytime you make a change, you want to do that. So here we also have a few other options. So I'm going to go to Tools, Options, and then CorelDRAW. And these are things that I like. These are things that really can make things different and just make it more convenient for you, but they're not necessary for your laser system to run. First thing I'm going to do is on the Getting Started, I like it to where it starts a new document. If you make a lot of mistakes like I do, I change my undo levels to 999. Again, unnecessary different features. Then we're going to go ahead and we're going to go to customization. This is one of my favorite features because the pastel default look that you see on CorelDRAW is kind of hard to see, especially if you're running a smaller screen. So you can change the theme to a darker color. I like the darker colors, as you can see here. It just pops it better, and it's easier to see a lot of the attributes. Again, personal preference. This is the area where you can come in and look at all these different features and adjust it. Another one that I like to do is go to the Tools section and then remove the Treat Objects as Filled. This can be a big problem with the laser system, because when you have a line going behind another line, or if it is filled, you can't get access to that. And so even though that it is not actually filled, then you want it's easier for grabbing, but it's harder for editing the files. And again, save settings as default. Anytime you want to make an attribute or a change to the file, if you see this save settings as default or any of these default screens pop up and you're not sure what you did, don't hit save or OK, because you're changing a default for that. So it is that is the process of setting up your laser system. You can adjust it exactly how you want it. And once you hit save settings as default, now if I were to close this program down, close CorelDRAW down, I now have the option to open it back up. And now when I hit file new and pop up on a new screen, it's going to look just like this. My page size is going to be set up. My color, my attributes are going to be set to dark. My color palette is now set up. This is highly important if you are running a laser system, because if the line thickness is not set to hairline, your laser is not going to cut. If your color palette is not set properly, then the correct color can't be used with for cutting, marking, engraving, which is how the drivers are to do different operations. So very important that you follow this procedure. If you don't have that, or if things aren't set up quite right and you're not sure, hit the F8 button, follow this procedure. This webinar, of course, will be recorded. The link that you are watching it now with, you can, of course, click that link at any time. And then within a month, this webinar will be posted public as well on our YouTube channel. So now that we have our laser system set up, we now need to kind of just I'm going to give you a basic understanding of the operational basics of the laser systems, or of the CorelDRAW, I'm sorry. CorelDRAW you've got a lot of different stuff on it, but most of the features in CorelDRAW aren't highly beneficial for the laser system. And so I am going to go through and just kind of show some operational basics. We're going to go through the basic toolbar, zooming, panning, how to do basic file creation, object sizing, fills and outlines, text and fonts, duplication and nudge, guidelines, centering and snapping orientation, the difference between grouping and combining, as well as how to order different products. If you're a pro, most of these type of stuff should be second nature to you, but you never know if you will learn, different capabilities just by watching this. So now I also have this file as well. If you want to scan this QR code, or when you actually signed up for this webinar, we have the optional CorelDRAW files so that you can follow along. So if you scan this, you can download the actual CorelDRAW files. I have them saved as a much earlier version, so that you can open them from earlier versions. I think I saved them clear back to CorelDRAW 14. So if you have an earlier version, you can scan this QR code, open up this, and you can follow along. If you want to, of course, watch the recording of this at a later date while you follow along to go through these processes, feel free to do that. I also have the CorelDRAW Shortcuts card, which Corel offers. If you scan that same QR code, this is the same one as before. It'll take you to all the different files I'm going to show. So it's one single download for the Corel files, as well as the shortcut card. So if you want this convenient shortcut card so that you can have it up on your wall next to you and really give you that quick key type reference card, it's very advantageous if you're learning CorelDRAW, or if you want to make yourself more efficient by learning where everything is quickly without having to search for it each time. The next is we're going to go through the basic toolbar. I'm going to kind of go through some of the different techniques or the different tools within the toolbar. Again, this is a basic overview, so we're not going to get into depth, and we're not going to go into some of the more complex options and features at this point. The first one is just kind of understanding the basic toolbar. Now that we have it set up for the laser system, if you've never used CorelDRAW before, we have the basic toolbar here on the left side. Anytime you select any one of these items on the left toolbar, it's going to give you those tools. If you click them once, it's of course going to tell you with a little flyout exactly what that tool is called. So as we go down the toolbar, you'll be able to see what they are: the text tool, the dimension tool, the contour tool, the shadow tool, and get an idea of what it is. So if you're not sure what a tool actually is, click on that. Now the little flyout, which is that little arrow in the bottom right-hand corner of each one of those tools, when you click and hold it for a second, it's going to give you the flyout. So each one of these tools actually have more than one tool associated to them. So If you're not sure if your ellipse tool is the right one, or if your shape is not set right, click the little flyout, which is, again, that little tiny triangle in the lower right-hand corner of each one of the tools. Once we identify the tool that we want, when we select that tool, it's going to change the attributes on the top. So your pick tool is your most common. This is going to be what you're going to use for grabbing objects, moving objects, grabbing corners of objects. You can size and scale, position, orient. This is kind of your mouse cursor, if you will. The one I like to use is the zoom tool. Instead of using the little magnifying glass, I use the wheel on your mouse. So if you just rotate your wheel in and out on your mouse, it's going to zoom in and out. Now, if you push that center wheel down and then drag with your mouse while pushing the wheel down, it's going to pan. This is highly advantageous when processing and moving around in CorelDRAW, because you can pan and zoom just by rotating the wheel and then holding that wheel down and then panning around. It makes it for a very, very quick, easy access for seeing what you're working on. So zooming, kind of positioning, moving your pick tool, using and understanding your toolbar on the left side. Anytime you select an actual tool on your left-hand toolbar, the attributes for that tool will show up on your top toolbar. So on the top side of the toolbar, if you turn on cropping, it's going to show you all the tools associated to cropping. So anytime you select a tool off of the left-hand toolbar here and want control over that tool, just look at your top toolbar and we'll have access to that. And we're going to get into that more, but this is basic kind of understanding. So basic file creation, here we go. Basic file creation, you're just going to select any one of the tools, and then I would just click it and click and drag. Any one of the tools that we want to do, again, here if I click the circle and I click and drag a circle out. So that's how simple it is to design it. Design a simple file. If I want to do a line, again, I'll click the fly out, and if I click and drag, I can draw it freehand. Or if I just click once, it's going to give me a straight line. And then I click again and it's going to give me a straight line. If I hold the control key, it'll hold that line straight. The pick tool, again, gives you control over those attributes of each one of those design elements. So it allows you to select objects, move, size, position. So that's the basic understanding of your drawing tool if this is your first time or you're just starting with the laser system. So using this tool, practice with it, play with the different tools, adjust them, move them, size them, and stuff like that. Within the system. Now, sizing, of course, you can grab it in the corner like I just showed you, or of course you can, besides just selecting it with your pick tool, sizing an object within the handle, you can just grow it up if you don't care what size it is or if you're doing it. But if you want to specifically size something, once an object is selected, we then can type specific dimensions in. So if you want to put this in at 6 by 6, then hit enter. Or if I don't want to do both dimensions, I can hit this little lock and then I can put one dimension in. So I'll hit 3 and then enter, and it's going to keep the aspect ratio the same. So that's what that little lock does for you. Of course, tools or text, same thing. You can select your font size when you do it, or you can type in actual text dimensions. Some people don't realize that if you want to type in text, you can put it in at a specific dimension. The lock is also an aspect. So if I want to put it in at a different dimension, I can skew the text to a specific aspect. You can also grab the handles with your pick tool, rotating it back and forth. You can mirror it this way, it controls. And so just adjusting your size, usually using your pick tool or putting in your dimensions for each one of these objects or attributes. And it doesn't matter if it's text, if it's a circle or square or lines, any one of these objects, you can either type it in or you can, of course, grab it, move it, position it. Now, fills and outlines is very important, especially on the lasers, because the difference is when you fill something, the laser will engrave that object. And if it's filled with the correct color from the correct color palette, it will be identified by that color. So the color red will be the settings for color red. So if you're engraving with the color red and you want to put in the power settings and then you want a different power setting for the color green, we would need to fill each part of your object a different color. Outlines will actually produce a cut path. And so I'm going to show you how to do that here. So each object on the screen, once you have it, and these have to be vector objects that were drawn in CorelDRAW. They can't be like a JPEG or a bitmap. So I'm going to select it. and I'm going to left mouse button click on the color that I'm working with, and that's going to fill it that color. So click on blue, it'll fill it blue. Now, if I want to remove a fill or an outline, I am going to click the little box at the top, which is the slash box. And then if I left click, it's going to remove that. But the attribute of that file, that element is there. If I right mouse button click, it's going to outline. So if I right click on blue, it's going to turn it in an outline blue. And since I set the setup for hairline, the laser would then cut that path. So the text here, I'm going to right or left click on the slash, and then I'm going to right click on red. Now, if I set red for my laser system to cut out, that would, of course, as long as it's the right color and it's the right color palette, we're going to have no problem cutting that file out. So making sure that you have the right line thickness, as I showed earlier, combined with the right color, and then making sure it's an outline. So the outline has to be both the right color and the right thickness to be a cut path. So if I wanted to cut dimensional letters out, I would type my text, go into my cursor tool, size it to the position or size that I want, go over to my color palette, right click on red, and then left click on the slash to get rid of the fill, and then give me an outline, send that to my laser, and I'm now cutting out dimensional letters. So it is that simple, and this is why it's so important to understand how to outline something versus fill something. So text and fonts are the next one here. Text and fonts are going to be your process of working with different fonts. And there are, when it comes to the laser, there are two different methods here that we use depending on how you're doing it. You click your text tool off your toolbar. A single mouse click is what I would recommend for most everything. It's going to produce artistic text. And so there are two different types out there: artistic and paragraph text. Artistic text is when you type it, I can position it, edit it, move it anywhere on the screen, just like any design element. However, it is still text, so I still can adjust my text. I can re-edit it. I can adjust the font style. One thing I do like about CorelDRAW 2, when you move your field aside and you just hold your mouse on the different fonts, it's going to show you what that font is before it actually does it until you select it. So, but artistic text is nice because I can position it anywhere I want. I can adjust it as an independent design element. You can adjust it, you can size it, you can scale it, of course, but you can also go to the shape tool and I can adjust the kerning or the distance between it without actually scaling the individual letters by going to your shape tool. And that's what your shape tool does for you. Now, if you click on the text tool again, and this time instead of clicking once, I click and drag. When I click and drag, it's going to give me what's called the text box, which is known as paragraph text. And so this time I'm going to just right click and paste text inside this box. And what this has done is it's given me a text box. And a text box is nice because it keeps all that text kind of like an office document. And we still have, of course, all the text tools. But if you're doing like a plaque and you need to keep all the text together, we're able to keep it and kind of position it all within this box. If you make the line too or the box too small, it'll give you a red line. That indicates that all your text is not fitting in that box. Of course, you can, of course, size it as well. If it doesn't fit in there, you can drop the scale down. But again, it's going to keep all that text within the box and allow you to control those attributes of that text. Again, I can do the kerning in there. Again, not changing it, changing the spacing between the letters if I want. And it gives me all the same tools of the text. Now, if you start with a paragraph text and you don't like that, you can right mouse button click on that text and you can click convert to artistic text. If you don't like that, we can go back to the shape tool here. And again, we can make adjustments, or I can right click and then convert that back to a paragraph text. So anytime you design something as paragraph text and want to convert it to artistic text and have the ability to jump back and forth, or if you find that you're trying to position something manually and it's just not positioning properly, right click on it and convert it to a paragraph text so that you have that confining box and you can control your text within that box. Once you get it just right, and if you don't like that, you can, of course, right mouse button click again and convert it back to artistic text. So back and forth, either one of them works. Adjusting the fonts, the text, and stuff like that. But very advantageous if you're doing plaques and stuff with your laser and you need to fit it within a specific size of material that you're going to place this text onto. The next is duplication and nudge. Duplication and nudge are the process of actually duplicating your object and then moving it around specifically. So we want to position it and duplicate it so that it's in a specific location or adjust it each individual attributes. So to do that, I have a design element that's already done on the screen, and I need to make a whole bunch of them. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to set my duplication distance. When nothing's selected, it'll show up on the top of the screen here, and I'm going to set it to 0, 0. It won't be defaulted at 0, 0, but I like to set it at 0, 0. When I hit Control plus D, it's going to duplicate it, but it duplicates it right on top of itself. When I grab it and hold the Control key, it then duplicates that offset, and then when I hit Control D again, it's going to then duplicate that offset. So I can select it, duplicate it in place, move it over, and then hit Control D again and again, and it'll duplicate it across the field. If I want to nudge something, here's your nudge adjustments. Nudge is the ability to use your cursor keys on your mouse, or not on your mouse, but on your keyboard, to position something or adjust it to a specific distance. So nudge is convenient if you want to kind of shimmy something over. You can adjust the distance here. As I adjust it to 0.01 and then I hit the nudge again, I make smaller movements. So this is nice. Now, if I have the duplication distance and I want to be specific, I'll review the size of my object, and then I'll adjust my duplication distance to slightly larger. So in this case, I want to go 3.6 because the file is 3.5. And then now when I hit Control D, it's going to duplicate it exactly 3.6 inches over. So now I know I have an exact 0.1 inch distance between each one of these products. And then if I want to do another row of that, I can then take and go negative 2.1 because I'm going to go down, positive will go up. And when I hit Control D again, now I'm duplicating the entire row. So Control D can work by holding your Control key and just moving it and then duplicating it, or by distance. So this gives you the control of duplicating an object. If you're going to make a template, this is how I would make a template or fixture or jig with your laser system. If I want it to be right up to itself, and I would say this object was 3 inches and I duplicate it at exactly 3 inches. And when I duplicate it, it's going to put that line right over the top. So if I was engraving, say, anodized aluminum tags and I was not going to cut this, I could butt it right up against, and of course, butt the samples into your laser system right up against itself, and then it would engrave on each one of those tags across the field. So if I'm making a template, I want a little spacing between, because I'm going to cut that red color out to make the template and then place my tags into that. This is where duplicating and nudging your objects will give you the control of over positioning those objects onto the screen. Now, guidelines are another handy tool, because guidelines give you a non-printable orientation reference visual component, if you will. So if you click and drag from the ruler, either the left ruler or the top ruler, it's going to drag out what's called the guideline. These guidelines can be positioned anywhere on the field. So if I want to put it at 3 inches and this one at 2 inches, I can type the distance, or 1 inch, and hit enter. If you click and drag from the top ruler, one you're working on will turn red. And again, you can type in the dimensions. This gives you a visual orientation or reference if you're working on something within your field. It is nice because these are purely visual. Your tools on the top here is going to give you the ability, but I will turn snap to guidelines on if I'm going to actually want to put, say, an object or an attribute into there. So if I want to scale something to a specific size, it's going to snap to those guidelines. So guidelines are nice because, again, they do not print with the laser. They're there for a reference location. You can click them twice and you can rotate them. You can move your rotation factor, and it's just going to give you that outline or reference location of exactly how to position something. Or if you have a row of parts and you want to make sure they're all oriented at the same level, you can take all the parts and, of course, snap them to the guideline. And again, it gives you that orientation or location, and you can have confidence that it's not going to be sent to your laser or your printer system and be cut, marked, or engraved. So they're purely visual reference lines for helping you design. Now, if you don't want to use the guidelines and you just want to learn centering and snapping, this is the next step. Centering and snapping is very, very necessary, because if I want to have an object that fits within another object exactly in the center, there are a couple different ways to do that. So I have a whole slew of different objects on my screen here. And if I wanted to center any one of these objects together, you can just drag with your pick tool and hit select the two that you want together, and then hit C and then E. And then C will center horizontally, and then E will center vertically. If I select everything and hit C, it's going to center everything horizontally, and then E vertically. So this allows me to kind of center each object in itself together. And there are a lot of quick keys. These are great. So as long as everything's selected, you can do, R for right, T for top, B for bottom. And you can kind of orient your graphic for one to the other. If you just select two objects together and hit T, it'll orient the one to the top of the other one. B for the bottom of the other one. If you just select everything and hit the letter P, it'll center to your entire page. So if you want to know where these are, they are actually under objects, and there's all your quick keys on the right side here. L for left, R for right, T for top, B for bottom. So as long as the object is selected, these quick keys are very, very advantageous, because they're going to give you the ability to quickly orient left and right, center, position. Well, if you don't want to use that, you can also, of course, use your snap. Snap is nice because when you turn your snap on, as I just showed here, I can grab any one of the corners or center point and it'll snap to another object. And so if I want to snap this line to that center line, or if I want to snap the center, I'm going to grab the X in the middle. And then when I get close to the center of the other object, it's going to then snap to that object. So this is another way you can quickly and easily center objects or position them in the upper left-hand corner without using the quick keys. If you want to snap to the guidelines, like I showed before, you can, of course, select the object, grab the corner, and then now we can snap that to the guideline. If I have more than one, if I'm trying to position them all in a row or something, it just gives you the ability. There's a couple different ways, again, to quickly and easily orient and position your graphic. So if I'm doing a box and I want to snap text to it, I would size it, draw my outline, snap the text to the center, and now I've got a name tag, for example, to cut on your laser system. So it's that simple using the quick keys. That's my favorite. So I just hit 2 and hit CE. It's going to center position. If I wanted center top, I'd hit CT. So center top. If I wanted in the center position or in the horizontal, I'd hit ET. So horizontal top. And so your ER, center right. So use those quick keys or use the snap key to position your graphics one object to another. This does not work if your object is grouped or combined. If it is grouped or combined, the entire object that has been grouped or combined will do that. And the next is group and combine, so you know what that is and how it is. Grouping and combining takes several different attributes. And so if I centered all those items together like I just showed you, and then I wanted to group and combine them together so that I can't move them independently anymore. They're basically one object. That's what group and combine does for you. So I'm going to show you the difference between group and combine so that you can kind of get an idea of what the difference is. Grouping the object is attributes or one handle of that object, and it's going to adjust everything. Let's go ahead and hit undo here. If you draw a box around it, it's the same way as selecting it. So holding shift allows you to select one object, then another. If you want to target it, or you just draw a box around it, of course, it gives you the ability to then group that object as well. So if I want to ungroup the object, I can click the ungroup button at the top, as long as that object is grouped. Selecting an object, as long as everything's within the object here, you can see here I'm not quite selecting the second one. It still doesn't select it. So when you draw a box around something, you don't need to worry to get it specific. You can get as long as the entire object is not select there. So now if I were to fill that grouped object, it's going to just fill both of those circles black, so making the overall circle look black. And that's really the big difference here in the case of group and combine. So now I'm going to take the second object here, and instead of grouping it together, I'm going to combine it together. So this is going to combine the two circles as two objects, making it one object. And so instead of filling just the whole object. Now I've filled both of the objects. So combining is going to basically combine those two together to create a separate design element. Now you can't just ungroup like we can before to get access to that. I can remove the fills here by right clicking as I showed you before. But if I want to uncombine it, I have to go to Object or hit Control K, and that's going to break the product apart. And so if something won't ungroup and you find that it's combined, you need to break that object apart so that we have independent control. If I want to combine it back together, of course, you can select the two objects, combine it together, so that it's going to give you the ability to fill just the outline or the in-between component. So if you're designing, say, the tire on a car, we would need to combine it together. Where if I'm just grouping it together for positioning or orientation, I would need to make sure to group it together so that things don't get moved apart. Now you can group one object and then you can group another sequence of objects. You can also, up there when I showed ungroup, you can ungroup all, so it ungroups everything on the screen. So be careful when you do that, so that you can actually mess things up if you have certain attributes grouped and others not. So that's why I have the undo set for 999, because that's how often I mess up. I find that I learn the most when it comes to design software by messing up. It is a great learning tool, messing things up. So the next is, of course, is going to be ordering. Ordering is the process of knowing where something is positioned on the field, behind something, in front of something, especially when you're doing filled objects. So if I want to put, say, the word Trotec onto this graphic here, and I place it on using the snap feature to the center, and the object disappears. This is because the word is behind the filled object. And so if I want that, I can select it, and then I can hit Shift Page Up. That will position it above or in front of the other object. When you do that, I can then hit Shift Page Down, and now I'm putting the other object in front of that. So you can hit the Shift Page Up, Page Down, depending on which object, or you can go up to the Options menu or Object menu, and then click on Order, and it's going to show you all these different tools. So you can put it at the back of the page. You can do, the other one is nice. You can say in front of. When you do that, it's going to give you an arrow, and you can point to the object and say, I want this object that's selected to be in front of the object that you then click with the arrow, and it will position that object in front of that object. And so this is nice. So if I'm engraving the gray tone at a different level using, say, 3D mode, we can then make sure that you see it. So if you don't see something on the screen, the laser system won't engrave it. It's just like a printer. So the other thing is, you got to be careful with when you're laser cutting something, if you have a line that is behind another object. So if I have a red line that was behind this and you don't see it, the laser system will still cut that line. So you can literally cut your product in half, not realizing there's a line behind it because you can't see it. This holds true with your vector lines or your cut line paths. So be careful to make sure that your order is set properly. Your objects aren't just behind something and they're truly clipped and broke apart, so that they're not actually going to cut those objects out. So that's it for the basics. So that will give you kind of an understanding of how to use the combining and the grouping and positioning, orientation, and stuff like that. So now I'm going to go into the process of, these are different tools that I highly recommend. These are tools that I use every single day. There are hundreds, if not thousands, of different tools within CorelDRAW. For laser processing, the majority of those tools are unnecessary when you're making laser-ready files. So I'm going to give you a few of my favorites, tools that I couldn't live without these days. And as CorelDRAW's added them and I've found them, they've become invaluable tools to make my process faster, more efficient, easier, and just ultimately give me a quicker process to complete a task. And so that's what we're going to cover here today. Here's a quick little tip for you. I've showed you how to select everything, but sometimes when you want to select an object, but I don't want to draw a box all the way around it, or I don't want to hold the Shift key. If you hold the Alt key, the ALT Alt key, I think there's a little video here. When you hold the when you just select an object, of course, you got to grab it by the center or select it by one of the attributes. You can do that. So in this case, if I hold the Alt key and just drag a box, anything that this box touches is going to select, but only if you select the Alt key. So this is a great little tip if you want to kind of get into somewhere and just touch a few objects. Again, just anything that's touching, and these objects are grouped or combined for this to work. Or if you just have a few of the different objects that you want to select that are broke apart or grouped, and it's hard to select them, or you don't want to select them one at a time, hold your Alt key down, drag your box over the top, and again, it doesn't have to be selected. It doesn't have to be clicked on. It doesn't have to be selected entirely. You can, anything that touches that box will then be selected. So a great little tip for when you want to grab something and you're having a hard time getting access to it. So here is some recommended file creation tools. These are tools that really do make life easier when it comes to designing, creating, developing projects for your laser system, or editing somebody's file to make it laser friendly. So I'm going to cover several of the different tools here that I use all the time, including importing, shape creation, text to path, welding, virtual segment, boundary and create boundary and smart fill, contour, power clipping, tile, and tracing tools. Again, the same files that I showed you before, you can download this one. This is a different file from the other. I have two separate files. All the basic ones that I covered earlier are one single file, and they're separate pages on your CorelDRAW. So when you open it, all the different instructions for each one of those tools will be on your CorelDRAW screen. So you don't necessarily have to watch this seminar at a later date. You can just download this file, and it'll give you the instructions. It'll show you exactly what the tool is called. It'll show you the before and after of each one of these tools, so that you can kind of have an access or quick access to a lot of these different tools at a later date without actually going back and finding it on the this presentation, or if you don't necessarily need to follow along visually. Scan this QR code if you want to download the files if you haven't already. The first one here is importing. Importing is very important, and one of the reasons so many people love CorelDRAW when it comes to lasering. The import filters are outstanding. They provide the ability to import all these different file formats that you may not have the software for into CorelDRAW. And the reason that's important is customers' files that you find online and files that you receive are in all different formats. And so compatibility is key. Nobody has the time to, or the money to not only learn other softwares, but also, have to spend the cost to buy these softwares just to have access to these formats. So being able to import a PDF or a DXF or DWG or a TIFF format and bring it right into your graphics or CorelDRAW Graphics Suite 2020 is hugely advantageous. CorelDRAW has 96 different file format import filters. And just to give you a comparison, Adobe Illustrator, which is the other big, very common graphic software out there, only has 26. So CorelDRAW is a very powerful tool when it comes to working with other design platform formats. And so that's why importing files into CorelDRAW, and this is a very beneficial component of CorelDRAW, because it gives you the compatibility of being able to take a lot of different formats and bring them into your CorelDRAW. And it works really simple. Of course, you would just hit File, you would hit Import, or there's a little download button at the top there, as I circled there, and then select your file wherever it's located on your computer system, select it, and then hit your import button, and it's going to do that. And you can see all the different file formats here. If you select a specific format, the import filter sometimes works a little better, but most cases I can just hit all formats, click it, and I can either click or drag, or I can click it once, and if you click it once, it'll bring it in at the size that it was created. If you click and drag, you can actually adjust it to the size that you're working on. So the import filter is very powerful when it comes to CorelDRAW, and one of the big benefits, because you can work with so many different the laser can work with so many different formats that you may not have the software for. So if it's an AutoCAD file and they set it as a DXF or DWG, you can bring that in using the import filter. So great tool to learn and know and kind of understand how powerful that tool is. Now, of course, shape creation, if you're creating your own designs, your files and stuff like that, shaping and creating the different shapes is advantageous, especially because each one of these shapes, the laser takes that shape and immediately converts it to a finished product. So you draw a square, you send it to the laser, you cut a square out. It's that simple. As long as it's the right thickness and color, as I said before, shapes are advantageous for creating that. If you click the little flyout expansion tools I showed you earlier, we can then go into the individual segments of each one of those. And so if I click the polygon tool in this case, I click the polygon tool and drag it out. If I go to the top toolbar, whenever selecting a tool, of course, you have the tools from that. And so if I type in 20 and hit enter, it's going to give me a 20-sided. If I do another one, it's going to give me just the 8-sided that I started with. So you can control any one of these different sizes. I changed that to 3. I've now gone from a 20-sided or 8-sided to a 3-sided, making a triangle. There's star commands, or the star feature here, so you can control the different stars. The common shapes is another one that I use. Spiral is a neat one. And again, if you don't want 20 spirals there, look at the top there in the left-hand corner, you can adjust it to 100 or 200 or 10. So you can control. Common shapes is another very popular one I use a lot. If I just need a heart or an arrow or a smiley face, it really just gives me those quick ones and I'm not having to draw them separately. So each one of these shapes can then be filled. They can be engraved. They can be cut. If I need to modify or edit them, I can, of course, size them with my pick tool. But my shape tool, I can grab any one of the little handles and then I can adjust them. So when you click it with your shape tool, you can then make adjustments to that design element just by dragging them around, looking for the handle. And the handles are usually different colors. And so the main handle is usually the green color in CorelDRAW 2020. And it's cool too, is when you fill these, you get all kinds of cool abstract looking graphics. Now, if you right mouse button click on it and convert it to curves, it's no longer that design element, if you will. So it's no longer considered a rectangular box. So with the shape tool, I can then edit specific nodes. And so I can double click on it, add extra nodes, and now it's going to be as though I literally drew individual lines instead of a box format. So this is how we are able to create simple designs, edit simple designs, modify them within their attributes. And so if it is if it's a circle or if it's a triangle, using the shape tool within that triangle, or if I right click it and hit convert to curves, now I can edit it any way that I want, but it is no longer considered a rectangle or an ellipse at that point. Once you convert it to curves, it is considered just single or drawing components. Text to path is another powerful tool, especially for the laser system. Like you can see in the upper right-hand corner here, text to path gives me the ability to basically drag objects to a specific shape. It allows you to add artistic text along the path of an open object, for example, a line, or a closed object like a square or a circle. And it also allows you to take and fit existing text effects. Paragraph text don't work as well, and paragraph text in the text frame can be fitted to open paths only. So if you, as I showed earlier, the difference between paragraph text and artistic text, most of the time when I am processing this and want to control my text to path, if I'm on like a line segment or something like that, it needs to be artistic text. So CorelDRAW treats text fitted to a path as one object. However, you can separate it from that object when you no longer want it to be part of that path. So once you've got that shape, you can separate it from the closed curve path, and then that text will remain that shape to which it was fitted. Or if it'll revert to its original appearance when you straighten it. So here's how it works. Basically, you take your text on your screen, in this case, artistic. I do recommend the artistic text because, again, the paragraph will only work around an object like a circle or square. It won't work on that. Then you hit text, then fit text to path. And all you got to do is just move your mouse. I'm not clicking or anything. I'm just moving my mouse near the path. And then as I drag my mouse around, it's going to show me a live view of what it will look like until I click the button. Once I click the button, it's going to then put it there. If I want to adjust it at that point, I can click it with the mouse and adjust it, or I can adjust it to a specific dimension or position by using the text to path tools, which will show up on your top toolbar. This is a great tool for, making that object stick to another. So here's a different one, same text on a different path. So in this case, I am positioning it onto a different shape. And so as you can see here, it's fixed that shape. If I want to come back and edit it at a later date, I can then grab it again. If I'm making text, kind of like the shape of a mountain or something like that, if it's some type of like plaque and you want that shape to be the shape of an outline, or maybe to follow the path of a logo. Here's the same text on just kind of a wavy shape here. But once you have the text the way you want it, if you no longer want the object it's selected to be connected together, just like we have just like we did when we adjusted the object from a combine object, we need to break it apart. And once you break it apart, it becomes a separate entity. And so it's basically a separate entity. But the nice thing too is if I click the text tool and go back in there and type on it, it's going to type on that text and it's going to follow that little process or outline around it. Once you do break it apart, it doesn't know what that outline is. And so it's not going to really follow that outline. So if you do want to go back and retype the text, make sure it's still combined with the original line segment that you'd run, and then it will continue to follow that path as you're processing it. And then of course you can engrave it, you can cut it, you can mark it, you can print it, and you can do whatever you want with the file at that point. Welding and intersecting objects is another very powerful tool. This is when I have more than one objects together and I want to combine them to be an object. You can create irregular shapes by welding and intersecting objects. You can weld and intersect most any object, including clones, objects of different layers, and single object with intersecting lines. You can weld objects to create one object, or create one object with a single outline. New objects use the welded objects parameter as its outline, as it adopts the fill and outline properties of the target objects. All intersecting lines will then disappear once it's welded together. So what I mean, and of course to show you, is the easiest way to do this is you'd have more than one object on this screen and I want to make it or combine it together to be one object. There's other ways to do this, but the weld is nice. Now, all they need to do is touch another object. So in this case, I'm going to take a couple different objects and just touch them together and then select them all together. So selecting all the shapes, you can hold the Alt key, you can click one at a time with Shift, or you can drag a box around it. And then the weld command will then show up on the screen. When you click that, it now creates one single entity. So this is nice too, because it's one object and it is a solid converted path, so I can fill it, and it basically becomes its own separate object, no additional lines, no cut paths, and it gives you that object to combine those lines together. So any different type of shape that we want to weld together, in this case, I use the Control-D and duplicate, Control-D again and again, and I'll just take some circles and I'm duplicating them together. So if I want a cloud-based looking object with just the outline, I'm going to select those objects and hit weld, and therefore it brings them all together. Now I have that pillowy, soft cloud look, and I can fill it if I want to do that. And it's really easy to do that as long as the closed curve objects are combined or overlapping together. So now there are other tools in here as well besides the weld command. There's the trim, there is the intersect, there's simplify, there is front minus back, back minus front. And so what these do is different attributes of them. So when you click each one, and I suggest doing like this, you take a different box and just follow and hit undo and do each one of them. And it's going to show you what these do. Some of them we move the front to the back, to the back to the front. Simplify is going to basically just do one to the other, depending on which one's on top of the other object. Intersect will combine the two together, creating another object, as you see here. And so these are kind of like an offshoot of the weld. Trimming will trim one to the other, as I showed earlier, and just kind of trim one to the other. It's like a clip away, if you will, from that object. So that's what the weld and the trim commands are going to do for you. They give you the ability to take different objects as long as they're a closed curved drawing object, and they're going to weld them together. Now, this doesn't work if you have a single line and you want to weld it to another line. It doesn't work like that. So they need to be closed curve. They need to be lines and circles, or I'm sorry, not lines, but circles and squares and shapes and stuff like that you need to combine together. So the objects need to be a closed path. So if you were to select that path and try to fill it and it fills up, you can combine it to another object. If it's not filled together, there are other ways to do that. And we're going to get into that here coming up. So the next one is advantageous, and I use all the time, is called the virtual segment delete. This is one of my favorite new tools that came about 3 or 4 versions ago in CorelDRAW. It is a great tool because in the past you had to break things apart. You had to go into the nodes, you had to edit them, and you had to delete each individual node. The virtual segment delete tool kind of does all that editing for you and gets rid of those lines that are behind other objects, cut lines that you don't want the laser to cut line on. And so it's a quick and easy tool for getting rid of those unwanted lines. And the way this tool works, it's very simple. When you have different objects on your screen that you want to do, click your little flyout section here where your crop tool is, and then click on and turn on your virtual segment delete tool. The virtual segment delete tool, once turned on, allows you to select any attribute of a specific line, and it will delete up until it sees the component of another line. So anytime anything between the 2 line segments will be deleted, whether that is a single line or not. If you drag a box through everything, it will delete everything in there. So it's as simple as just taking the line tool and then going on. And so this is how simple it is. So I'm going to literally just draw a couple hand-drawn lines to make a tic-tac-toe board. And when I click the virtual segment delete, I can click any one of these lines and it will delete those for you. So this is a very handy tool for trimming up those objects that can be problemsome. Again, you can drag a box over it, you can click it with the screen, or click an individual line segment, and up until that point is going to do it. And here's an example. So here's a file that I downloaded. It's vector format, and when I convert it to an outline, because I want to cut this out, I'm going to find a problem. And the problem is it looked good when it was filled, but now if I were to cut this out, I'm going to get these little segments that are going to cut out. So I'm going to go into my virtual segment delete, select that, zoom in here, and then just go over these sections and then delete those extra objects. So now, once this is done, I can then cut this design element out on my laser system, knowing that only that red outline is going to cut. Just because it looked good as a filled object. Here's another method of doing this. This is a really cool one I just recently found. If you hold down the Alt key again, and then just drag your virtual segment delete through the objects that you want deleted, everything this touches up until that point, once I let go here, will immediately be let go. So that's a great tool. Really allows quick and easy access to kind of this works very similar to the weld key in this case. But whenever you have those segments that are just in between and you want to delete a specific line segment, there are different ways to do it. The drawback of using this one is that I can't fill this object. If I welded those together, I could fill that object up. Where now, right now, if I were to ungroup it, there's still single line segments. So I couldn't fill this object. So this works mainly if you're just going to be a cut path, for example, with the laser system. Now, the next one is kind of when you kind of need the best of both, is the Create the Boundary and the Smart Fill tool. These are another really good laser tools. The Create Boundary tool, you can automatically create a path around an object of a selected object on a layer to create a boundary. This boundary can be used for various purposes to produce cut lines. The boundary is created by a closed path that follows the shape of the selected object. The default fill and outline properties apply to the object created by the boundary, where the Smart Fill kind of does the same thing, but it fills that tool up. And so that's why I'm putting these two tools together as one, and I'm going to showcase both of them. The Smart Fill tool creates a path around the object area and then fills that object up. So they kind of do the same thing, but if you want to fill an object, you use the Smart Fill. If you want just an outline of the boundary, and then you can fill that afterwards, you can do that as well. So they both kind of do the same things. And here's how they work. And here's a great example of where I would use those. So I have this vector format fish. This fish is set up as vector format, so it's a drawing. It's not a pixelated like a bitmap or JPEG. When I go to create an outline to cut this fish out on the laser, as you can see, there are several different design elements not combined together. So if I were to select the whole thing to create an outline to say maybe create a cut path, I right click on it, and you're going to see all the different design elements here. Well, this can be a problem. If I just want to cut the outline out, you can see all the different pieces in here. This can be a problem. So in this case, I want to engrave this fish and I just want to cut it out. So I wanted to create an outline just around the outside so the laser will cut it out after it's finished. So in this case, I'm going to select it. And then at the top of the screen, there's going to be one called Create Boundary. And what that's going to do is immediately just look at that object, and it's going to give me a complete separate outline around that object. This is hugely beneficial because now I have a cut path on my laser system. I can engrave it. I don't have to go through and try to combine them together or weld them together or individual node segment or do any of those attributes to it. All I have to do is select it. So here's another example of an object that I want to fill, and I want to engrave this one and engrave it out. So if I were to go to try to fill this up with the color black, I'll left click on black and it doesn't fill. Well, if your object does not fill, that means your curve or your outline object is not closed. And so I can go through with my shape tool and find all the individual pieces of this. And when I broke this one apart and grabbed individual product, there was like 20 different pieces. That's a problem. Well, I just need to fill it up. Well, the Smart Fill tool with the boundary tool would kind of do the same thing, but you'd have to fill it. Or the Smart Fill tool in this case, all I have to do is hit the tool on the left here, Smart Fill. And then when I select the center in this object, it's going to just fill up the boundary. As long as all the line segments are overlapping, they're touching. So there's no open or curve. If this does not work, then the line itself, there's spaces or gaps between them. So that creates a separate object that I can then, of course, delete the original, because there's no point in trying to fix all the little design problems. I've literally made a copy of it by filling it up, and now I can, of course, come to whatever color I want, color it in, and now this is ready to be laser engraved with a nice fill object on it. So that's where the Smart Fill is advantageous. When you have objects that are not closed, you have several different design elements. As long as they're overlapping and you need to fill a certain area, you can quickly and easily fill that area. Your other option, of course, on this same element, I could have clicked the boundary tool and then selected that boundary, pulled it aside, and then filled that. They both kind of do the same thing, and they both kind of work the same way. But those are the two different attributes, and it's very advantageous when it comes to laser processing, because in most cases we need to do either a fill of an object for engraving, or we need to do an outline of an object for a cut path. And the other nice thing about doing this, if I was just cutting this one out, all those individual line segments would cut separately. So you'd see a little part cut and then it would jump around. Your laser could jump around because it sees it as individual pieces. Where if it's one continuous curve as an outline, the laser is going to give you one continuous cut. And sometimes that can improve the cut quality because the laser's not jumping from one side to another based on how it was drawn, or if they're not perfectly touching, or the cut lines are not overlapped properly. So it's just going to improve quality as well as your processing time when running this. So Contour tool is another nice tool here. Contour is a great tool when it comes to processing outlines of an object and where I want to create an offset that's of an equal distance. A contour tool allows you to take an object and create a series of concentric lines that are in progress on the inside or the outside of an object. CorelDRAW also lets you set the number of the contour lines in the distance between them. This is hugely beneficial with the laser because you can do, as you can see sample here, where the twill materials are, this is the way that this is done, where you take some text, you create a contour on it, and it literally welds the outline together for that. And let me illustrate here. So first I'm going to show you here, say you have a plaque that you want to put maybe an object inside of another object. And so what we're going to want to do is we're going to want to go to Effects, and then we're going to go to Contour, which is Control plus F9 is your quick key. When you select that, over on the right-hand side of the screen here, the Contour command will show up. So when I select the object that I want to contour, I can then control my contour offset. I can control whether I want it to the center, inside, or outside based on how my design. So in this case, I'm going to go inside. I'm going to go one step, and then I'm going to put my distance at 0.01 or 0.015. Whatever that distance is, and what color you have the contour at, it's either going to outline or just fill it. In this case, I just want an outline, and then I hit apply, and it applies that contour equally in position to that offset distance that I just put in to that. And so if I want to apply text to this plaque and I need that contour to give me a reference, I can also right click on that contour, break it apart, and make it a text box. So the text stays in that box at the contour. If I want to do more than one, I can click 4, 5, 6, 7, as many steps as I want. If you want them to fade from red to black, you can do that as well. And we can get into that. That's how we do 3D, but I'm not going to get too much into the detail. For text, works the same way. I will then convert my text, of course, get rid of the fill. Let's go ahead and add an outline. And then I'm going to do a contour outline to the outside. And the nice thing is when you do a contour on text, it also kind of welds it together once it exceeds the distance of the offset. So when I hit apply here, you can see it welded some of it, but not all of it. If I adjust the size here a little bit, you can type it in, or you can use the little arrow keys up and down. It literally welds everything together. So with 2 colors, I can tune the laser now to cut through the blue 1 layer and then cut through the red 2 layers to give me a 2-layer twill type object. If you want to break it apart, just like any other object that's combined together, we can hit break contour apart, and now they're separate objects. So I can no longer adjust the contour on this object. It's a separate piece from one to the other. So if you need to change the colors, the line thickness, or anything within that, once you break it apart, you can't adjust contour again, but it is a separate design element. So that is contouring. Contouring is very convenient when you want something to be equal in distance, or if you want it to weld together to create an outline for 2 different layer type cutting. Power clip is another very powerful laser tool because it allows you to take objects and different attributes of objects and place it inside of another object, effectively clipping that object into that object. So it basically lets you place vector objects and bitmaps, such as photos, inside other objects or frames. The frame can be any objects, for example, artistic text or a rectangle. When the object is larger than the frame, the object called the contents is cropped to fit in the form of that frame if you would like. And I'll show you how that works. This creates a power clipped object. So this is beneficial because you're not having to do any of this manually. Power clipping is powerful because if I want to maybe put a decorative design element onto a picture frame, so I'll take a design that I already have here. This is a vector format design, and I want to place it on this picture frame, but I don't want to engrave away all that inside data. I need to clip it together. So power clip is cool because you can then take one object and select it. You want to make sure the object is selected that you want to power clip. And I'm going to show you a couple different ways to do this. Here's the drop-down menu method. You can then click on power clip, and then you click on place inside frame. When you do that, it's going to give you a small little black arrow, and all you have to do is click the frame. This frame needs to be combined together for this to work. And then it's going to combine that together. So I would ignore the red, and now I could stick the frame into my laser system and engrave this pattern onto it. So that is a simple method of doing power clip. Here's another way. I'm taking an actual photograph. So this is not a vector element. This is an actual pixelated JPEG. Again, place object inside the frame, and then select the object. Now this is going to automatically size it or leave it as the original size. And there's a couple different ways we can position our object. I can extract it if I want to edit it. So we didn't actually, it's not permanent. So we can edit it or we can extract it. So editing it or extracting it leaves the frame intact and allows me to control and adjust it or adjust things manually. So if you want it in there a very specific orientation, or if you want to adjust it up or down, you can do it this way. You can also right click and hit edit power clip, and this allows you to manually adjust things. And so if you want that to be positioned exactly right, then you can do this manually. That is, of course, the older way to do that. The newer CorelDRAW versions up to 2020 also have the nice little feature here called fit contents. So fit contents is the same thing. So I'm going to take the same object and I'm going to drag it into the power clip. You can also right click on an object and just create a power clip boundary, and that works as well. But they fit contents and you can automatically scale it here. This is a nice new feature that scales it to fit within that object. So lots of different ways to play with power clips, but ultimately it gives you the power to clip some object inside of another object. So if I'm engraving this, or if this outline is a cut path, I can then engrave it and then cut it out very quickly and very easily. And the photo itself is not permanently that way. You can adjust it and pull it back out, put another object into it. Like I said before, a third and final way that I do all the time is you can just right mouse button click on any object and you can click create power clip frame. And this, anything you drag within that frame will automatically power clip. So like I said at the beginning, lots of different ways to do everything. Power clipping is a great tool when it comes to lasers or even printing, of course, because we can position any of these attributes together to make a quick and easy product or application. Now, moving on from that, I've created one called tiling, using the power clip tool to break vectors apart and or bitmaps, such as photos, apart, so that can be engraved or printed separately to then be put together to create very large images. Say you wanted to take a corporate logo and put it on 500 tiles that are an entryway to a building. Well, no laser is that large, but if the tiles are, your laser system can be basically the size of the largest tile. So if I have a laser that's 12 by 24, I can do 2 tiles at a time, but effectively I can do an infinite amount to be on the side of an entryway to a building, or a side of a building, or a sidewalk or something like that. And so that's where tiling is nice. And it works very similar. It is a power clip feature. The way that it works, I've got a vectorized object. This also works with pixelated, so a photograph, as long as you got enough resolution. If the object is ready to go, all I want to do is I'm going to take the duplicate features I showed you before. So I'm going to take my tile size. In this case, I've got it small just for reference, but that could be a 12 by 12 tile. And then we're going to snap it to my objects. And we're going to duplicate this object. Or I can just hit control or duplicate to the distance of 2 inches as well, or 12 inches. In this case, I will hold Control D, snap it to the one, and then hit Control D again. And again and again, until basically I've created the number of tiles. What I'm doing is I'm creating an array of the size of the tile I'm working with. And again, it doesn't matter what size, whatever size that tile is, just make sure you do enough tiles that's going to fit over the object that you're going to be engraving. So in this case, I'm going to pull aside here and I'm going to hit duplicate the rows. So basically I've made a whole bunch of boxes that are overlapping. So then I'm going to select all those boxes, and that's big enough to fit my logo into. So I'm going to do a wall, like this would be a nice signage. And then I'm going to group those boxes together. So Control G for group, or click the group command. Then I'm going to select my object. And we're going to do just like we did before. We're going to power clip this object into all these boxes. But instead of just one object, I'm basically placing it into a bunch of grouped boxes. Once I do that, it should center it automatically. You can extract it like we did before, edit it, adjust it. And this could be as big or as small as you want. And then we're going to hit ungroup. And the nice thing about following this little procedure, once you hit ungroup, because it is power clipped, it will literally create each one of these objects as a separate component. So now I could take each one of these. If they were a 12 by 12 tile, and then I can engrave them separately, and then I can put them together. I do suggest that you put numbers on the back of the tile so it's easier to put the pieces back together. But we've done tiling. I've done tiling type projects that were 30 feet by 30 feet using 12 by 12 tiles. As long as your laser system or printer can print up to the size of the object, that you can fit into that the laser, for example, then you can do as many as you want. And as long as the graphic, like this case, it's a vector art, so I'm only limited to the max sizes of, say, CorelDRAW. So we can go massive sizes if you want. So it is just a great tool for breaking parts. And then if you're putting it back together to do the background of a restaurant or a club or something like that, this is a great tool for doing that. Using the power clip, grouping it together and ungrouping it to basically break it apart. The red is your positioning or orientation. You would not cut that. You would just use it as reference and then engrave each piece separately to then put back together in its final, your final command, or your signage or floor, whatever it is that you're processing. The next is tracing tool. The tracing tool is a convenient tool because when you have a logo, a lot of times logos you pull offline, you don't have the best type of graphic. There are two different types of main graphics out there. There are vector graphics, which are the best kind, which is unlimited resolution. Vector graphics are going to be like we've made basically everything we've shown on CorelDRAW so far. They're gathered from your curves and their physical attributes. Now, pixelated objects like your JPEG, your PNG, your GIF format, your TIFF formats are pixelated file formats. Pixelated file formats, sometimes I want to convert a pixelated object to a vector object so that I can edit them. I can cut them with the laser. So that's what the trace command works with. This doesn't make a perfect copy into trace, and so there is some editing. So the way this works is the first thing we want to do is we're going to want to import our graphic. The higher resolution the graphic and the better the quality, the better this is going to trace. And so I'm going to select my file, import it in, and just click it into the screen here. Once I have that done, I'm going to then select that file and I'm going to hit Trace Bitmap. What this is going to do is it's going to take this pixelated object and give me a lot of different controls on how I want to convert it. So what it's going to do is it's going to look for the object and it's going to give me a separate screen that's going to pop open here. You can use your mouse wheel, of course, to zoom in and really see what it's doing. It's going to show you the before and after. Now, as you can see, this is a pretty low resolution graphic and I can control a lot of the different settings. And so as I adjust these settings, you're going to see a live view on the bottom of the screen that shows you how to adjust this. The more adjustment you do to it, you want to definitely move it around and look at it, make sure some of the details. Sometimes you're not going to get it perfect. And in fact, most cases, you'll never get it perfect. But what it's doing is it's taking a photo, if you will, of that original graphic, and it's trying to convert a line or turn it to a drawing tool. You do have a lot of controls over here. I can do colors. And so if you have a multicolor logo and you want the colors, you can put them in here. For lasers, I typically leave it black and white. So I only have either on or off, black or white, convert it to an outline. And then once I get it to as good as I feel I can get it, we then go ahead and hit OK, and it's going to give me a copy. That copy is going to be next to the original pixelated object. And as you can see, the box shows, and this is now a vectorized object. So vectorized object means I can now select that object. I can come over, I can right mouse button click, left click to get rid of the fill, and I can now cut this out on the laser. But when you vector an object like this or trace an object, it's not going to be perfect. When you zoom in onto the individual line segments, you're going to see that they may not be perfectly straight. And this is where your shape tool comes in. You can go to your shape tool, of course. You can then select your nodes. You can delete. You can right mouse button click. You can hit to line. And I could literally go through and modify and adjust this any way that I want. I can pull guidelines down to make sure they're all lined up, snapping. And it can become a project to really convert to absolute perfection. If it is something of a decent resolution, a little higher quality, it's going to produce a better trace. So please understand, this doesn't make a perfect vectorized trace object of anything that you bring in. It does a great job. And the different objects that you bring in, you definitely play with this, work with this, but now it has become a laser cuttable file. I could cut this file out. I could edit it, I could modify it, where the pixelated object, the most I could ever do was engrave that. So that's where the trace command is very, very beneficial for the laser system. So that is the final tool that I'm going to show you, at least today, because we don't want to go too long. We have some questions and stuff like that. Here are some other resources that I have put together for you in methods if you really want to continue your learning and training and learning on CorelDRAW. CorelDRAW General has, of course, all kinds of tutorials. These are free training. Free training is outstanding. Courses like I'm doing right now will be posted on YouTube. You can access those. So there's lots of different data on YouTube. We've always called it YouTube University, and the fact that you can really get a lot of content. Now, if you really want to in-depth go on to and learn different processes, there are other methods. Lynda.com, which is now LinkedIn Learning, also offers all different courses for a small fee. I mean, ultimately, it's $39 to buy them outright, or you can basically pay, $19 a month to have access to LinkedIn Learning, which is, thousands of different software programs of learning. So this is a great resource for you. You can scan this QR code if you are interested in going to that. So those are some different learning methods if you want to continue your education from CorelDRAW. Little bit of the September material deals. We are, Trotec is producing a deal for this month. Free shipping on any material, $25 order. If you're interested in Trotec materials, go to engravingsupplies.com. If you missed last month's third Thursday on large format system, you can scan this QR code and go to last month's third Thursday, which will be posted live now, and you can review that one as well as previous third Thursdays. We do this every third Thursday of the month at the same time, so keep up with your inbox and stuff like that if you want to be kept up to date on these type of seminars and webinars. We also, of course, if you basically subscribe to any of our social media platforms, we're always going to post these types of free training courses on those as well. All right. Well, thank you so much for watching. We're going to now move to our question and answer section where we have Darrell Stephens and our Senior Product Trainer for CorelDRAW, Roger Wambolt. And so let's go ahead and kick over to him and we'll get going. Welcome, gentlemen.
Hi there.
Hi, welcome.
All right. Well, thank you for joining me. That went a little longer than I expected. I figured about an hour and 15 minutes, but we're about 10 minutes over here. So we have probably a lot of questions I see over on the right side here. So we're going to get going here on some questions and answer these questions for the people as they come in. So let's get going. So what do we got here? Okay, first question here. On CorelDRAW 2019, the lower left-hand corner of my boxes does not line up to 00. How do I reset? Is that one question or two? I think it came in as two questions.
I treat it as one, I think.
I treat it as one as well. Yeah. Roger, do you want to answer that?
Sure, it's fairly simple. Now, you showed one way to do it. The way I would, and as you mentioned, there's many different ways to do the same thing. If we can share my screen. So you want to reset 00 to the bottom left-hand corner. I would simply click the intersection where the rulers intersect, left-click and drag, and bring this right down to here. Snap it to the edge, and let go. And we now have bottom left 00.
Great. I actually learned something there. I do it a much slower way.
One more thing with respect to that. If for some reason you want to move the rulers, hold your shift key down and you can actually bring the rulers right down to that location. Oh, sorry. That's right. Ignore that. That was turned off in 2020. It was a feature in earlier versions where I can move the rulers right out onto the screen.
She actually said she was 2019, so that may work.
Might be able to in 2019.
Yeah. Okay, next question. Is there a quick start document with all the setup information? You mean for laser systems? Absolutely. We have a quick start document within our disk that is on our job control disk. And so if you go onto our job control disk that comes with our laser system, you can click on that quick start guide and it will do that. Also, this video that we just recorded today will be posted online. I'm also planning on taking a lot of these different tools as well as the initial setup procedure and recording it as a separate component so that you'll have access to that. Keep an eye on our social media platforms for updated versions of those type of trainings. Okay, when I try to erase, it just moves the nodes, but it doesn't actually erase. Do you know why? Now, Roger, probably another good one for you.
I'm not sure. It depends on the type of image you're dealing with. So what I'm understanding you to say, and I'll pop up draw here, is if I have an image, I want to erase a portion of this, and wouldn't you know it, draw is doing a bit of a backup. Just a second here. Grab my eraser tool. If I want to erase a portion of this, it should just erase whatever I've got selected. Now, I've got the background selected, not the pink element, so it's just erasing that. It would depend on, I'd have to see the file to properly answer that, but it should be erasing it. Now, as you mentioned before, the F8 to reset. Sometimes if a tool isn't working properly, you might want to try a reset. F8, or there's also the application data folder to reset the application, but that's something completely different.
Yeah, I found, especially on some of the earlier versions, the reset sometimes will solve a lot of problems or
Yes.
issues or bugs that might creep up specifically for that may come about. I found that maybe when you have an update or Windows update, sometimes things can get a little weird, and a reset can solve a lot of problems.
Absolutely.
Okay, I run Corel X3 and I'm looking to upgrade versions to my new laser. Which is the best version suited for laser usage? That's it's kind of a loaded question. The benefit of staying up to date with CorelDRAW is that you get to keep up with all the latest and greatest filters. When somebody sends you a file in a different file format or even another version of CorelDRAW, you can actually open that. There's nothing worse than getting a file from a customer and you can't open it because your version is much older than the customer version. So staying up to date, definitely the 2020 is a great version. I suggest it. And the nice thing about that too is Roger has actually given us a discount. And so if you are looking to upgrade to 2020, which is the latest version, you can get a 15% discount good until the 27th of this month. If you go to Corel.com, click on the promo code when you check out and click on and put in the word Trotec, and you'll get a 15% discount.
Sorry, error on the date of that. That's the 21st of this month.
Oh, 21st. Okay, I
Yes,
wrote down the
21st.
27th. Okay, so the 21st of that month.
Yeah.
So yes, I mean, staying up to date is hugely advantageous, not only for the filters. You're going to have a lot. X3 is definitely an old version. And so you're going to have a lot of these tools that I just showed don't exist on that version. So having a lot of those benefits and tools are going to be beneficial for doing that. Darrell, what do you think on that? I mean, is there any version that you like better than the others?
I mean, I think typically X8, X7 are good versions, but again, I think you're right. The newer the version is, the less complications and conflicts you're going to run in with customers sending you art files that you can't open, and that can be really, really frustrating. So I would go to the newest version, and but again, I think a lot of people are still out there using X7, X8, but they do have some great opportunities to upgrade.
Yeah, definitely beneficial to do that. The subscription method is nice too, because if you just always want to be up to date, you can subscribe to CorelDRAW instead of buying the full version. And this way you're just always kept up to date. You just pay your monthly fee. Like a lot of software companies are going for that. That's what I do. This way I'm never out of date. What does RGB work and CMYK does not? Darrell, you want to answer that one?
Well, the laser system we're using recognizes different color palettes, and obviously we have the RGB is compatible with ours. It may read some CMY colors, but it's going to have some conflicts, and you're going to be missing data. So it's really easy to switch over, like you showed in your setup process, and we've even created our own palette that's in the startup disk when you get a laser.
All right. Will CorelDRAW please bring back the old notes section that used to be unlimited characters?
I've made note of that, if I can use that term.
Okay.
I've made note of that, and I'll take that back to the dev team and see what we can do with that. I completely understand where you're coming from on that.
Okay, good. So we got the right guy on the screen here with us. Can I load a old or new text fonts to the current font list of CorelDRAW? That is Darrell, you want to take this one? Okay.
We surely can. The font navigator allows us to bring those in. Pretty easy step process to bring the. I mean, again, if you have the version, the only thing I'd be very careful of is going out and searching a lot of free fonts. You get a lot of corrupted files and viruses that can be added into your system.
If I can throw something out as well, you mentioned a font navigator. I'm assuming you're talking about Bitstream Font Navigator.
Yes.
Corel launched the Corel Font Manager with CorelDRAW X8. And one of my favorite features of that is that you can use fonts without actually installing them into Windows. So where Windows has a limitation, the number of fonts you use, the Font Manager, I've got over 50,000 fonts on my system, none of which are installed. And I can use any one of them right within CorelDRAW.
Interesting. And how does that work, Roger?
Sure, I'll show you very quickly.
Because I'm very interested. So that's a good question, Jack.
So you're in CorelDRAW. Under your fonts drop down, we have filters now. And let me just make sure I've got no filters selected. I can create subsets. So I want to take a look at only my chalk fonts, for example, only my fonts that I use for engraving. I can scroll down and I want to take a look at fonts that are not installed. And so, and let me just turn off this filter.
So the not installed ones, are you point to a folder the first time you do that? Yes,
exactly. They're in your documents folder. Now, by default, we now put all of our assets in the documents folder, Corel content. And in here, I have a fonts folder. Perfect. I have AB template fonts, which is one of my customers, a number of their fonts. I've got a large font collection in here. Is where my 50,000 fonts are.
Great.
And Font Manager is simply going to point to that location. And again, it allows me to use a font that is not installed. So this font isn't installed, and I can go ahead and use that without a problem at all.
That's a great tool. I wish I'd known about that years ago. You say that's fairly new, though, right?
That's new in X8.
Oh, okay.
I'm sorry. It's been new since X8.
Okay, good. I did not know about that. Great tool. Great tip. I'm trying to laser cut foam inserts. Any suggestion about how CorelDRAW can help trace accurate outlines and create a compact layout? That is a tricky one. When you're creating an outline of a tool or a path, my suggestion is, because you need accuracy. My suggestion is to use an old style flatbed scanner. So you take your tool and slay it right onto the flatbed scanner, and it's going to give you an exact 1-to-1 ratio of that object. So don't take a photo of it with your camera because you're going to get angles and stuff like that. A flatbed scanner will scan that object, and then you can bring that into CorelDRAW. You can use the trace. You can draw around it. So you're going to get a very, very accurate outline of that tool so that you can cut it out onto your foam. Darrell, any method that you found better than that?
I like the scanner. Sometimes it is hard to get the pieces onto the scanner, so I will take a ruler sometimes, lay it next to my item, and then take a picture, and then I can scale my ruler that's in the picture to be as close as possible. But yeah, if you can do the scanner for actual size, it's great. But the picture will work if you put a ruler in the image also to have a reference point.
Yeah, and if you do a camera too, you want to make sure you take it at exactly 90 degrees because you can't get that angle, and then when you go to cut your product out, it's gonna be skewed on one side. So that can be tricky. So make sure you're centered over your object as accurate as possible. So what's the solution with Corel not importing AI files anymore? Every time I try to put one in, I get the spinning wheel of death and have to shut down CorelDRAW. I've not had any problem with that. Roger, you come across an issue? It's probably the version he's using.
My first thought would be the version of Draw you're using, whether or not that file format is compatible. Now, earlier versions of Illustrator files, I'm not an Illustrator user at all for obvious reasons, but yeah. But in the save as, or when you're saving an AI file out, there's a second dialog box in the save process where you can use compression on the file. We don't like the compression.
I got it.
If you save it without compression, you may have better luck. But again, I'm leaning more towards the version of Draw that you currently have.
Yeah, and you got to be careful too. If Adobe Illustrator was just updated and that file was saved, and CorelDRAW you're using an older version, sometimes compatibility issues will not allow you. Just because it's a format doesn't necessarily mean that it's going to import that exact format. So sometimes you need to have your customer revert back to an earlier version of Illustrator, and then you'll have no problem.
Right.
How can you fill with the custom graphics such as the rain graphic or camo? Roger, probably another good one for you.
Power clip. In a nutshell.
What's that?
use the power clip feature.
Oh,
So
power.
you have a custom graphic. Let's say it's a corporate logo, and you want to fill it with a rain pattern or a wood grain or a camel. Simply power clip it into it.
Yeah, power clip.
And for power clipping, you showed a couple of different ways. My preferred way is just simply right click, power clip inside. Then I'll do a control click on it to go into the edit state, and a control click outside of the power clip frame to take me out of the editing.
Okay, so you're using the quick keys. Yeah, I mentioned that at the end. You can right click on any object and make it a power clip frame. And the nice thing about that is anything you do to it will literally power clip automatically, and then you can of course pull it out. You can extract it. So that there's no question. Power clip is the best way to do that. You can go back and watch my little presentation on this recorded if you can't remember how to do that. When I try to engrave on a leather cuff and use the center engraving, it starts engraving outside the engraving area, not on the brace side. Any idea what I'm missing? I use digital template of the cuff. I mean, the only reason it would not actually start on the file itself is if the laser system sees something else in the file. Sometimes maybe, for example, it's a grayscale that looks white, but it's not. So the laser's not actually engraving the object itself. Make sure that you look at your file, zoom in, make sure the colors are actually white and blacks or the right colors. The other thing that would do that is I can't think of any other method to do that. The laser is actually seeing some of it. I mean, if it's hidden or if it's not something, go to your wireframe feature in CorelDRAW, and it's going to show you anything that may be hidden behind the scenes that you're not seeing, and make sure that that object is deleted or the object is power clipped within your object so that you don't have extra. The only reason a laser would engrave outside of it is if it's seeing some portion of your file there, and then it's trying to run that, even though if it's 1% black, which you wouldn't visually see.
The other thing you can do is double click your pick tool, and that will select everything that's drawn, and then do a Shift F2, and that will zoom to selected. So if you see your design or your logo actually moving out of position, you know you've got something else selected out of the way.
Yeah, the goal is to find what's being engraved. Apparently there's something there that you're not seeing. That's got to be what's going on.
I know that I've seen a lot of customers that if they have a bitmap that's oversized, again, there's data outside their logo area. It could be a pixel, a small shape that they're just not realizing is being copied into their image.
Yeah. About power clip, is there any way to avoid or skip the certain area from engraving? Typically, the power clipped object is going to be engraved as the color black, and so if you want to skip that certain area, the only way to do that is to skip all of black. There's no way to skip a portion of that unless you have separate power clipped objects that are different colors and those colors match the color palette. Then the laser system allows you to skip individual colors. There's no other way to actually skip a design element if it's one portion or a portion of that power clip. I can't find the create boundary on my CorelDRAW. Any idea why not? Roger, I'm sure you know why the answer is.
A couple of things come to mind. First of all, depending on the workspace you're in, it could be at different locations. Depending on the version you're using, we changed the name of the arrange menu to objects menu. And so create boundary is typically objects shaping boundary. In earlier versions, it was arrange shaping boundary or arrange shaping create boundary, because we changed the name of it as well.
Yeah, different versions, as I said at the beginning, there are different locations as well as different names. So that is something, and some versions just don't have these tools. So if it's a too old of a version, it may predate that tool. How do you delete duplicate lines? With the delete key, right, Darrell?
Pretty much. One of the tricks that I found with it, if you do have overlapping lines, if you convert to curves and then use your shape tool to select on it, you're able just to then hit the delete key, and it will remove the line you've selected. Versus, used to be you would break it apart and separate it and all of that. It's become very easy just to convert to curve, select your shape tool on the line you want to remove, and delete it.
Yeah, and the reason that's important is because when you have more than one overlapping lines, those with lasers would understand 2 lines equals 2 cuts. And a lot of times you don't want to overlap because it can really destroy your finished product when cutting with your laser. So great question. Reset to original setting. Does it lose your saved work? Absolutely not. So when you reset to defaults, it's only setting the attributes of CorelDRAW to defaults. Your original files and designs will still be opened as they were before. It will not change anything in that attribute. Roger, any add on to that?
No, that's pretty much it. It will when you go to your welcome book, you'll see your previous documents that will be wiped out. But it doesn't impact on the actual files themselves.
Can we import a color palette from a saved file for an individual artist to use? I would assume so. Yes, there should be no reason you can't do that. Roger, you would know best.
Yeah, you certainly can. And to create a file, so what I'm seeing here is one of two things, or is two things rather. First of all, we want to import a color palette, which of course you can do. The second is we need a color palette from that piece of artwork. You can do that as well. So simply select your object, go to the Windows menu. So if I select this element here, I go to my Windows menu, down to Color Palettes, and create palette from selection. This will allow me then to create a color palette from that object. We call that ice cream. Click on save. It brings me into Draw, back into Draw, and there I have the color palette created from this design or from this object. Now, one more thing with that is if there is a bitmap in here, when I go to create that color palette, it's going to ask me how many colors I want to include from the bitmap. Default to 10, but I can bump that up to whatever number I want. And that'll then allow me to create a color palette from that artist's work.
There you go. I'd like to know how to invert or flip colors to black and white on a vectored image. Since that's actually quite easy. Roger, you probably have it up on your screen quicker there if you want to show them how to invert the colors.
Actually, I don't, but what I would do is one of two ways to do it is I can drop the saturation down, right down to nothing. So it takes all the colors out, makes it grayscale. The other thing is to print to a PostScript laser printer, black and white laser printer, and that will create an EPS or a PS file that I can then turn around and import back in.
Yeah, I mean, usually I just invert the colors under, I'm trying to remember where it's at, is under transform, invert colors. There's an actual button that actually inverts the color. So your white
and you want to do vector objects, is it?
Yeah, vector objects. And so if you take a vector object that's black and white, and sometimes you have like a white background and a black foreground, effects, transform, I believe, invert colors on the version that I was in my brain anyway. And so you can literally just turn it, because a lot of times on laser systems, if you're doing like a granite plaque or something like that, the laser engraves opposite of what you see on the screen. So you'll take a black and white object, as long as your background is filled white, when you invert the colors under transform, effects, transform, invert colors, the white will turn black and the black will turn white, so that it engraves negative or positive when you're engraving those materials.
It didn't do it for me. You're saying invert colors?
Yes.
I'm not seeing black and white there.
Well, the object has to be black and white is what he's referencing.
Oh, I see what you're saying. I'm sorry. My apologies. I misunderstood.
Yeah, so if you have a white box with black text and
Right.
you want it to be a black box with white text, instead of changing each design element, you can invert those two colors.
Now you could also use that in the on the prepress tab, could you not? Again, my strength is not the actual laser end of it.
No, I
But
understand.
if I was to go into here, for example, print, I should have grabbed a smaller document. And on the prepress, I have the invert option here.
Oh, yeah. You could also do that in our printer driver.
Okay.
So when you print directly from the laser system, you can invert colors directly. So you don't have to do that in your drawing program. But I do suggest doing it in your drawing program, because this way you know what is being done. If you forget to change that mode back, it can make a mess of other files if you forget you turn that mode on. But yes, you can do it in the design software. You can do it visually. You can do it in the graphic design software, or the one where Roger just showed me, as well as in the laser driver software. How do I change from CMYK to RGB? And the original artwork was drawn in CMYK. But Darrell, you know how to do that? Or you want to show that?
Not exactly on that one. I mean, I've changed it individually by each color, but I think is there a way to convert it easier?
I would probably try the find and replace.
Yeah, you could. I mean, the ultimate method is, of course, saving or doing your original file setup as RGB. Once it is a CMYK, it can be troublesome to revert back, but because your individual color segments are CMYK. So
Right.
yeah, that can be find and replace is a good one. Other methods, but if your object itself is CMYK, your best bet is to go in and actually select each one of the colors and change them to match the color palette. Especially on the laser, they have to match the RGB color palette in order to work properly for the laser system.
Yeah, the only other thing that I've done on this is if it's a very complicated project, I'll change it to grayscale so I can still get the similar reaction, and then it's just my cut lines I have to worry about converting.
Oh, good idea. Does the laser software exclusively work with CorelDRAW, or can the color etching settings be imported from Illustrator? Laser systems, of course, will work from any graphic design software. I mean, if the graphic design software can set up with a color palette and a line thickness, ultimately, I mean, you can run from, there's dozens of different design software. The most common is Corel, because it's evolved with the method of actually running products and materials or hardware like lasers. So this is why we're doing the course on CorelDRAW, because I would say 90+% of most laser owners and operators use CorelDRAW. So yes, the answer is definitely yes. Other versions and other different type of design softwares will work as long as they can support a different color palette, the right RGB, typically like the specific line thickness, as well as things like a page size, make things easier for you. But yes. A customer sends me a font they want to use. How do I install that into CorelDRAW or find it elsewhere? There's probably several different ways to do that. I've always just installed that as Windows-based fonts. You right-click on any font, and it's going to give you a button in Windows. Before you go into CorelDRAW, if you right-click on a font, it'll say, do you want to install this font into Windows? Hit yes. That's all you have to do, and it can be off a desktop. It can be off your email. That's the quickest and easiest way. Once it's a Windows font, it will show up in your CorelDRAW list. I'm sure Roger's got maybe a few other methods of doing this as well.
Yeah, well, you can, as you mentioned, just go into your font folder. Let's go into here and right-click and install as an option. Or I can, so we have install, or I can double-click the font. It'll open up a sample. I have the install here as well. But keep in mind that the more fonts you install, I use the analogy, it's like hair in a drain. It'll just slow your system down.
Yeah.
The more fonts you have installed, the slower your system gets. If you're running CorelDRAW X8 or greater, don't install it. Use it as an uninstalled font.
Yeah.
Now, the other thing is that I see in this is a customer sends me a font that they want to use. You have to make sure that the licensing allows you to use that font. There's 3 different types of licensing for fonts. Some allow you to edit only, some allow you just to view, and then some will allow you to print. So it depends on the licensing for the font. And the font manager will give you that information. It will tell you what type of license that particular font has just by selecting it.
Okay.
I know with a lot of customers I've worked with in the past, to eliminate that, if they convert the images to curves, then I'm not going to be able to edit it, but I can still reproduce the diagram or the graphic.
Absolutely.
Yeah, especially for laser aspect. If you're having font issues, converted to curves, that is the best way to do it. If you don't want to install that, because Roger's right. If you get more than 200 or 300 fonts on your windows, it really starts slowing things down. So knowing that you can install thousands of additional fonts or have access to them in CorelDRAW it's a huge thing. That's a great tip for me. I'm installing that as soon as I get closed with this webinar.
Yeah, one more thing with that as well is if you have more than one system in the same shop, then you can put those uninstalled fonts onto a server, and multiple users can access that same.
Or just set them onto a cloud drive like a Google Drive, which has access from every computer.
I wouldn't put them onto a cloud drive. I've seen issues with fonts being installed into OneDrive.
I OneDrive, it's always problematic. Like Google Drive is, they're static on each system as well. Okay. So it would be actually set locally, but anytime it's changed on one, it changes all of them.
Right.
Or Dropbox works as well. Okay, what's the best method to scan artwork in a book to get an accurate vector file? I'm having trouble with shaded areas not converting over very well to the vector. This is tricky. Scanning artwork from anything, whether it's a high resolution scanner, you're limited to shading the type of quality of the original artwork. It's been printed and now you're trying to scan it and now convert it back to a vector. There's always going to be diminishing returns when this happens. So the better quality, of course, your scanner, the better quality your original print is going to help. And then using the trace feature, as I showed you earlier, to then convert that to an outline. And typically that usually means a lot of work in editing and modifying and really getting it up to par to make it laser friendly. So there's no quick and easy way around that, depending on the quality of your scanner, your print, or your scan quality, and then of course your tracing command. So lots of room for problems on that scenario.
Here's one more thing with that, Dave, is I've seen, or I have an application called Cam Scanner, and it's on my Android phone. It allows me to scan a book or whatever I want to scan, and there is an option in there to remove shadows, and it really does a nice job of cleaning up the design.
Okay, Cam Scanner.
It's in the Play Store. It's probably in the iStore or Apple Store, whatever it's called as well. But it's called Cam Scanner. Okay, and I use it quite a bit.
Okay. So there you go. Again, with the photos aspect, you run into angling issues as well. So it can be a tricky of keeping it perfectly square, flat over the top of it. Otherwise, you get some skewing effects, where the flatbed scanners do eliminate that, which is nice. Okay. Don't own a laser yet. Don't print color. They don't print color, do they? If not, why all the talk of color? Darrell, this is a good one for you.
Well, obviously we're burning and melting materials, so we get a reaction with the material we're using. We have a lot of ways that we can trick the system. There are multiple layer surfaces that we can, like plastics, that we engrave one surface away, it exposes another. We can color fill if we use tape and stencil things. So there's a lot of things that we're adding color to, but yes, the laser itself does not truly print color. When we talk about colors with our color palette, we're really using those as information to direct our laser to do a certain task, and then have a power and speed setting that we can set with that. So normally we do a lot of black fill so that our laser can engrave, and then we do a lot of red hairline for our laser to understand that we want it to vector cut. Typically we're tricking our material to get any kind of color contrast because we're melting and burning our materials.
Yeah, we're not actually printing the color. Ultimately, I think the answer for this guy too is color is used as a visible representation as a power setting. So when you set something as blue, we can say, okay, I want blue to be this power and speed setting. I want red to be this cut path. And so it allows you to design things knowing that the red is going to be a cut path. And so we use colors as basically as a tool to separate different attributes of a design so that it can be processed in the way that you want it to be done. So that's what colors are used for, not to actually apply the color typically.
Almost like shading a color, shading a print.
Yeah, no, I mean, it's basically a power setting. That's all it is.
No, I understand that, but the lower the power setting, the lighter the burn, if you will, is
Correct.
going to be.
You get, as you adjust it up and down. So if you have 3 different colors and you're engraving all 3 different colors, we can apply more power and speed to each color. And just like you say,
And it appears as 3 different shades. Is
the appearance of different depths and different effects. Yes, and that's what
we're dealing with wood, right?
Yeah. So I can understand if you don't have a laser, how that would seem complicated. We're talking all these colors, but we don't actually print or engrave color. Well, an original image from the internet engraved without any adjustments. I've done this many times when I grab an image or I just hit file print from a web page. You can engrave it right to the laser. Any internet image is, of course, going to depend on the quality of that image. If you pull in a high quality image, doesn't matter that it's from the internet or from your camera. It depends on the type of image. So if you're pulling an image that's a vector format, like a PDF or an EPS, and bring it into CorelDRAW, you can edit it, modify it. So, I mean, internet image, you can basically pull anything you see on the screen, you can engrave, but it does have to be vector format to cut with the laser system, but it doesn't matter if it comes from the internet or other sources.
And typically on that, David, too, if they will import it and then scroll into it, you're going to see the quality. If there's a lot of pixelization to it and it's not a high quality, you're going to reproduce whatever you are selecting.
WYSIWYG, what you see is what you get.
That's it.
You know what that is in Texas, eh?
What's that?
Wollywog. What y'all see is what y'all get.
Darrell's in Texas, so that works.
Texas now.
All right. When I try to reduce a long name to fit within a name badge by using the x-axis percentage box, it goes away. Okay. Example, I try to reduce to 90%, it goes to like 60. Undo, it does it again. It works properly. If I reset CorelDRAW, will it correct this? Maybe a good one for you, Roger.
I would think it might correct it. One thing to keep in mind when you're reducing text or dealing with text, a big misconception is the wrong word. What a lot of people don't understand is there's not only is there a bounding box, but there's internal leading to the font itself. So for example, it allows for ascenders and descenders. So you're going to have edge padding on either side of the font. So when you resize it, so for example, if you want a 2-inch high piece of text, it'll actually be a little bit more than 2 inches high that you're actually getting, or it may not measure a full 2 inches. That's because of that adjustment. But Anita, I think if you were to try resetting it, it may work. The other thing I'd try is with a different font. Do you get the same results?
Yeah, I've come across that where certain font styles or types can have some very strange results when you're binding them and stuff like that. So that's a great one. Okay. Oh, we're all done. That's the last question. Thank you so much. Well, I thank everybody so much for watching. It has been an outstanding course here. If you have any questions in future, feel free to let us know. You can go to our sales at troteclaser.com if you have specific questions, and we'll distribute them to the right location. Don't forget to go to CorelDRAW.com's website and promo code Trotec for the next week or so, and to get that 15% discount on your updated version of CorelDRAW.
I'll just throw one more final thing in. Just want to thank you very much for having me on this. It's been a lot of fun. Also, with respect to learning, and Dave, you alluded to this, the LinkedIn title that you mentioned, the CorelDRAW Essentials Training, that's my title.
Oh, great.
On LinkedIn Learning. So it's just over 4 hours of learning. They do have a 30-day free trial that you can sign up for on that. Also, if you're looking for some free training, learn.corel.com, and there's a number of tutorials there that you can access on CorelDRAW and learn its features and that sort of thing.
Great. All right. Darrell, any last remarks?
Just have a lot of fun out there. The more practice, the better you get.
Stay safe.
Great advice. Stay safe, everyone. Thank you so much. And we'll see you next month on next month's third Thursday.
Thank you.
Bye, guys.